It has been wet lately. Really wet. Wetter than a biscuit on the casting couch. Wetter than your mum at the dildo display at Sexpo. So wet, in fact, that finding somewhere dry to film has been about as easy as teaching a cat not to be a cunt. Fuck me. This impossibility is the reason I'm ripping up my mate's driveway, but you know what? This region was built on moving mud.
This tyre track?
Yeah, I can't see shit out of the fucking back of this thing, man.
Get out, you need to see where you are. But this is mud, these two are tyre tracks.
If you really think about it, I'm doing Jordan a favour. There's money in these hills, and for all he knows, it was a gold nugget that flicked out from under my tyre and smashed through his kitchen window. Probably wasn't, but it's a good thing there's no reception in these hills either. Can't send me a damage bill if you can't find me. You sort out your fucking driveway, mate. That's fucked.
I know, it's fucked.
Yeah, I hope I didn't make your driveway any worse.
You definitely did.
Okay, alright. Oh, sorry about that. Thanks, love you, see ya. Not that he'd want to find me anyway, because today I'm heading to Gympie, a town about an hour north of Brisbane, which for reasons I don't quite understand, everybody seems to think is a shithole. It's a place that was built on gold and riches, yet its fortunes seem to be receding faster than your hairline. It exists in a strange pocket of time, a twilight zone between classical farming and industrial wasteland. In some parts of it, you'd be forgiven for thinking the time has stood still, enveloped but not affected by the constant march of progress around it. In other parts, you do well to carry a handgun. But whether you're shooting the breeze on the beach with your mates or buffing pingers at the country music muster, the finger of blame always seems to point directly at Gympie. But why? Surely it can't be that bad, right? Gympie's a town of about 22,000 people. It sits on the Bruce Willis Highway, which runs from Brisbane to Cairns, and if the highway was a gum tree, then Gympie would be a koala with no arms trying to climb it. It spends its time getting battered non-stop by the never-ending barrage of B-doubles passing through its potholed streets, and for most of its life, this is what's defined Gympie. It's been little more than a town on a highway that you don't dare stop in, and honestly, why would you? Gympie is painted in 50 shades of uninteresting, and unlike most regional towns struggling to keep themselves afloat in the rough sea of failing industry, it would appear that the town doesn't bother with trying to trap tourists here. But believe it or not, there is more to the town than meets the eye. At least there used to be. Let's take a step back to the early days. Shortly after separation from New South Wales, the new colony of Queensland was hot, but not the good kind of hot. It was less Paris Hilton sex tape kind of hot, more flies are eating my eyeballs hot. For a fledgling economy based mostly around agriculture, this posed a big fat problem for the new inhabitants. How do you exploit a territory when its land is less hospitable than the surface of Venus? Enter James Nash, a dirt poor English immigrant. He was travelling north with nothing but a pick, a panning dish and a dog in case he got hungry. Seen here sitting on a chair and seen here taking a dirt nap under a concrete slab, Nash was on a mission to claim the government's £3,000 reward for finding gold. His search led him here to the tributaries of the Mary River, and within a week he'd managed to dig over 2 kilos of gold. Pretty impressive for a dead man. Although the government only paid him £1,000 of the £3,000 reward, Nash and his brothers decided to stick around anyway and ended up making plenty of profit from the new goldfields. With a sudden influx of passionate prospectors flooding the area from the southern colonies, Gympie's population exploded in the ensuing gold rush, and this humble little hamlet has now become known as the town that saved Queensland. Unfortunately, it couldn't save itself, however, and when the mining dried up in the early 1900s, so too did much of Gympie's fortunes. Its location on a major highway route and its proximity to farms and tourism areas has been the IV drip keeping Gympie's desiccated old body barely breathing, but the town is somehow still hanging on despite the best efforts of the pesky river that sits beside it. You see, Gympie floods, like a lot. The town is plonked on the aforementioned Mary River, which despite its unassuming appearance, harbours the capability to fuck up your property at any given moment. It's a river known for the many endangered species that call it home, such as the Mary River cod, which if you've never seen one before may or may not look like this fish, as well as a dog who won't stop following me around for some reason. Every now and then, this slimy little water goddess gets fat as shit and swallows half the town, and there has been over a dozen major floods that have inundated the area since it was founded. Common sense would dictate that after the first few floods, residents might have considered moving the town to higher ground, but apparently every time it happened, not a single person brought up not building on a floodplain at the next town meeting. And so Gympie has carried on through the decades, flood after flood, drought after drought. It's certainly not as prosperous as it once was, but in spite of everything, it's still here. But should it be? Gympie might seem elegant on the surface, but if you dig around a bit, you'll find that it's about as charming as using your rectum to smuggle pineapples. Wandering around on a Saturday afternoon, you might be hard-pressed to find other people, and the ones that do exist feel like NPCs in a Grand Theft Auto game. The city centre is little more than an empty husk, a paltry maze of ugly streets that lie in direct contrast with the decadent atmosphere the old buildings portray. Like pretty much every other gold town in Australia, the town's now filled to the brim with enough heritage buildings to make you willy wobble. A nod to more opulent times, Roman pillars line the walkways of the city, watching down over pavements stained by chewing gum and the many varied juices that emanate from the orifices of crackheads. Shopping trolleys often far outnumber people as they sit abandoned under the shadows cast by Gympie's extraordinary examples of engineering. But crack isn't the only contender in this crappy conurbations competition for common occurrences. You don't have to dig Jesus to get hard over a nice church, and that's one thing Gympie's got going for it. If you're looking for some hot, sticky Christian lovin', there's a veritable tirade of temples to choose from. There's also this piece of shit, which must be one of the most hideous churches I've ever seen in my life. Built by Methodists in the late 1880s, it's a Gothic monstrosity that sits on a hill overlooking the town. And if I had a choice between having to stare at this building for 24 straight hours or getting pegged by the hunchback of Notre Dame, I know which one I'd choose. It's an almost carbon copy of a church built by the Catholics on the hill opposite to it. But unlike the Catholics' church, which was built out of sandstone and is quite pleasant to look at, the Methodist builders were either too poor, too dumb, or too blind to see how decidedly unpleasant this new church was. But whether or not they did it on purpose, strange engineering is par for the course in Gympie. A look at the town from above reveals just how much of a mess this place is, and it was because of Gympie's rapid gold rush development that all the streets are fucked. They zigzag and flip-flop all over the hills as if the first residents gave the town plan to an autistic child with a crayon and said, "Have at it, champ." There's no order or structure to any of the streets, just pure, unadulterated chaos. Big steep hill? Slap a road right up it. Nice straight road? Better add some bends for no fucking reason. Sensible town planning? You can fuck right off with that idea. It doesn't exist in Gympie, pure and simple. Tell you what does fucking exist though, these cunts. These are little Corellas and there's thousands of the fuckers here. At the moment they're simply searching for seed on the soil, but in many parts of Australia these cockatoo knockatoffs are pests whose hobbies include eating farmers' crops, pulling apart street lamps and flatulating on water fountains. And like most cockatoo species, generally just act like assholes for the fuck of it. If the Corella's main mode of transport has got you rethinking air travel, don't be expecting any solutions on the ground here. In Gympie's heyday, it was a big stop on the railway line from Brisbane to Cairns, boasting a massive yard to accommodate all the produce coming from the nearby Mary Valley. Choo-choo trains would chugga their way up the Mary Valley line to collect fruit and dead cows, and it would all be brought back here to be transferred onto trains that would end up as far away as Melbourne. Like the majority of rural railways, the line and the station went the way of the dodo in the late 20th century, but that doesn't mean it's completely dead. The Mary Valley Railway operates a steam train every weekend to remind people how shit steam trains work. It rides all the way out to Ammermoor, but you can beat the train to Ammermoor by like 50 minutes if you just drive there, so that's what I did. I just drove there. It's easier. What's an Ammermoor, you ask? Well, nothing except for the annual Country Music Muster, a festival for people who like to wear Kubras, drink twice their body weight in Jack Daniels and raw dog strangers in a portaloo. The flock of thousands of 80 series Land Cruisers that make the pilgrimage each year to this venerable fuckfest is both a sight to behold and a spotlight on one of Gympie's key flaws, the Bruce Willis Highway. I mentioned earlier that one of Gympie's lifelines over the years has been the fact that it's the stopover on the Bruce Willis Highway, but that won't be the case for long. The government is very close to finishing Gympie's bypass, a 4-lane motorway designed to alleviate the clusterfuck of cars that causes mayhem on the city's roads every school holiday. And as we all know, bypasses are fantastic for the economies of regional towns. Once the bypass opens, it probably won't spell anything good for the town, so as a tribute to Gympie, I couldn't resist the opportunity to have the first public access of the road being the heavy traffic of my bare button balls. But maybe a bypass will force the town to become a destination rather than a leech, because let's be honest, Gympie's not that interesting. I struggled to find any funny looking landmarks to make dick jokes about, and it's not often you find a town this old with absolutely nothing going on. But you know what? That's okay, because what Gympie lacks, the places around it make up for in spades. To the east, you've got Tin Can Bay, which sounds like a fancy landfill, and Rainbow Beach, a tiny tourist town famous for its sand. It's southeast Queensland's very own Airlie Beach, situated just south of the southern end of Fraser Island, and the town gets its name from these massive sandblows, which despite being very nice to look at, are not all the colours of the rainbow unless it's a rainbow that someone smeared poo all over. The sand gets its colour from the various minerals found here, but they're only colourful for people who are dogs. The council has tried very hard to allay that concern by painting rainbows on every seat they could find, but cutting the legs off a horse doesn't make it a snake, it just makes it a horse with no legs. Stop calling it a fucking rainbow. Sorry. In spite of being 50% Porky by name, Rainbow Beach is still a very nice place to visit. It's a gateway to Kagari, and for some reason you're allowed to rip up and down the beach in your four-wheel drive, so, you know, hell yeah, brother. There is also some tremendous camping to be done here too, even if people do leave fucking toilet paper all over the place. To the west of Gympie, you've got the picturesque Mary Valley, home to a wide selection of things that usually end up inside your belly, such as cows, horses and helicopters. The area boasts a dazzling array of forest and farmland, and if you've ever wondered what it'd be like to be in a car accident, the roads here are a perfect place to get into a head-on collision with a Ford Ranger and the concubinical caravan it's dragging behind it. As well as the regular staples of cheese and dairy shops, every farmer and their dog has set up a campsite in the valley too, and when it's busy, the area ends up filled to the brim with motorhomes and screaming children. But even when all that chaos comes to town, even when the sweet songs of the millions of birds that inhabit the area are drowned out by the fevered screams of excited children and the incessant grumbling of four-wheel drives with exhaust louder than a jet engine, it's still far more enjoyable than being in Gympie. But the thing is, that's entirely inconsequential anyway. The city's never needed to make itself seem interesting because throughout the decades the greasy fingers of overweight truck drivers have sustained the economy just enough to keep the town alive. What fate will befall Gympie after the bypass opens, only time will tell, but maybe that doesn't matter, because where Gympie excels has never been within the city itself, but the area surrounding it. So what of it then? Well, if big sand blows tickle your chode, go to Rainbow Beach. If herds of cows raise your brows, go to the Mary Valley. And if bypass towns turn your undies brown, then I have 4 words for you, my friend. Don't go to Gympie. And now, a limerick. There once was a town full of snakes, with men who would look for gold flakes. The work was a bore, so they sat on the floor and decided to get super baked.